She's a member of the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. Representative Flesher is one of the 12 members of Congress appointed to the Regional Leadership Conference. She is, for which we are most grateful, a stalwart supporter of LSC. She's a member of the Bipartisan Access to Legal Aid Caucus. She signed the annual Dear Colleague letter in support of LSC funding every year. Thank you for your service and thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you so much, Lori, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to everyone at the Legal Services Corporation for inviting me to join you here today and to share a few thoughts for a few minutes. I really am thrilled to be here in a room full of my people. I would describe you as my people, and a room full of people who know how important having good lawyers is and good advocates is in the pursuit of justice, and people who do so much for so many in our community. Today is a real milestone as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Legal Services Corporation and honor the work that it does, and that everybody who's assembled here and who's committed to this mission does to promote and ensure equal access to justice. I'm so pleased to be here with so many members of our own community and so many dignitaries who are here in Houston visiting with us for this special occasion as the first of a series of anniversary celebrations in 2024. And today we have leaders of our legal community who I see throughout the room who've assembled to support and further this mission. So I'm really just honored to be in your company and excited to share just a few thoughts with you. And I think today's lunch really emphasizes what I always tell people in Washington. I love to tell people how we do things in Houston, right? That we have a special community here that really thrives on partnership, that works together in a collaborative way to solve problems. And we really come together to help. And there's really no better example than the work of the people who are assembled here today. From my own days practicing law in Houston, as you heard, I spent about a dozen years here practicing law, and I know from personal firsthand experience that legal aid is a critical tool to expand access to justice for all. I had the privilege of representing many clients pro bono as part of my service, especially as a young lawyer at Vinson & Elkins, that really emphasized the importance of that program. But I got to represent so many people who needed access to the courts for things that were both essential and also elusive for them. Like one of my clients who I remember so well was a naturalized citizen who was seeking to change her name after her divorce from an abusive husband and who connected with me through her volunteer literacy instructor. As she was learning to write her own name, she realized she didn't want to write the name of her abusive ex-husband. She wanted to write her own name, but that hadn't been handled in her divorce. And so she came to me, and I think a lot of people know here, name changes are sometimes hard to get, harder than they should be. And so I got to work with her on that and with her volunteer literacy instructor. And so since my first term in Congress, I have advocated for funding for the Legal Services Corporation. Most recently, I was happy to support the annual letter for funding for fiscal year 2023. I was very disappointed, as I'm sure you all are too, to see that the proposed cut in the proposed legislation, there's a proposed cut to Legal Services Corporation funding as we look ahead to fiscal year 2024. That said, Congress is still deciding the precise government funding levels, as I'm sure you all know from watching the news. We have not quite figured that out yet. And so I'm hopeful that this can be something that is addressed certainly this year and hopefully into the future, because we all know, everybody in this room knows that this proposed cut is going to affect hundreds of thousands of seniors and veterans and disabled persons and victims of domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence, who need the help that the Legal Services Corporation provides them to remain in their homes, to keep their families safe and access needed services, and just exercise their rights. So since I first took office in January of 2019, my office has worked here in our community in addition to In addition to on the legislative front in Washington, and I can tell you that we love to help people. We've closed more than 13,000 cases since January of 2019 in my office, but we can't help everyone. And we've referred more than 100 people to Lone Star Legal Aid for pressing problems that we can't help with. These are constituents facing eviction, immigration issues that we can't solve, and other matters. And they've sought help from volunteer lawyers in our community. And I'm so proud of the people who have helped them, who are so committed to justice and fairness in our legal system. And I think everyone in this room knows that we need more legal aid in Texas, not less, to achieve what is a founding principle of our country, equal justice under the law. Despite nearly 3 million hours in free legal services in Texas, 3 million hours that Texas lawyers have provided for low-income Texans in 2022 and 2023, that's fewer than 10% of the civil legal needs of low-income Texans are currently being met. It's just a staggering statistic, especially when you think about how many people have come together to do this work. And so I will continue to fight in Congress to make sure that Legal Services Corporation can get more funding, more support, and that we can really meet the mission of Legal Services Corporation for increasing funding and increasing and expanding access to justice for all. For those who receive legal aid, the impact cannot be overstated. And I know that earlier today you had a panel on domestic violence, and I just want to note as well how important that is here in our community and across the country. As I mentioned earlier, I had the privilege of helping a domestic violence survivor who, in working to rebuild her life, who spoke English as a second language and was learning to read and write and wanting to learn to write her own name, needed volunteer legal services. In Texas, domestic violence touches every city, every neighborhood, and every community. The Texas Council on Family Violence estimates that 1 in 3 Texans will experience domestic violence in their lifetimes. Legal aid is one of the most important tools available to reduce domestic violence. One estimate from the ABA has shown that the chances of a victim of domestic violence obtaining a restraining order increase from 32% to 83% when a lawyer is present. It is absolutely critical that we work to ensure the safety of all families here in Texas and across the country, and there are many ways that we must work to do so. In Congress, I have worked to provide much needed support and help to survivors and help them rebuild their lives and stop abuse before it happens. I believe that later today you may be hearing from one of my colleagues from our Houston congressional delegation, and I was so proud to work with her and to be an original co-sponsor of and vote for the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, which President Biden signed into law in March of 2022. My colleague, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, has been an absolute champion on this issue, and she was there working on it the entire time she's been in Congress, and that's for 25 years. The Violence Against Women Act provided essential support services for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and its reauthorization in 2022 was vitally important for our community here in Houston and communities across the country. In addition to reauthorizing VAWA, the bill made vital improvements to improve access to housing for survivors, to close the boyfriend loophole that exists in our gun purchase background check system. It helps survivors gain economic independence. And many of the improvements in the reauthorization bill that we just passed were things that we learned from survivors and their lawyers about the challenges that they face in court and in rebuilding their lives. Before its reauthorization, the Violence Against Women Act had provided $8 billion in grants to support services for survivors and to prevent domestic violence and sexual assault, and to investigate and prosecute abusers. And with its reauthorization, I'm pleased to report that those grant funds are coming again to the Houston area. Just in December of 2022, I was glad to announce that the Houston Area Women's Center, which is located in my district, would receive more than $800,000 for advocates to assist survivors during the legal process, including with protective orders and crime victim compensation. And I think it's really important, again, to go back to the partnership that we see across this room from advocates who play such important roles in every aspect of the lives of those who need access to justice and access to legal assistance. So we have to all continue to work together to address domestic violence in our communities, to address the challenges that people who don't have access to justice face. And I think on this issue of domestic violence and in every issue, we must work together to ensure that the core purpose of the Legal Services Corporation, ensuring access to justice for every American in every circumstance who needs legal assistance, remains the promise and the reality in America. So in closing, I just want to thank you all for all that you do to make this promise a reality. And I want to thank you so much for having me join you and share these thoughts today.